A new poll finds most Americans oppose trans athletes in female sports. A recent poll by the Washington Post and the University of Maryland shows that the majority of Americans do not support transgender athletes competing in women's sports. The poll shows that 55% are opposed to transgender women competing in high school sports, and 58% are opposed to allowing it at the college or professional level. Only about 30% of Americans support allowing transgender women to compete in women's sports. Last week, Louisiana became one of 17 states to ban transgender girls or women from competing on female sports teams.
This problem just seems to keep coming back and coming back in this story. I find that, again, asking the question to most Americans who don't understand anything about transgender people is just setting up these polls for not for success. And second of all, this is not a problem. There are no problems with, the amount of transgender people in sports is de minimis.
Other thoughts?
Go ahead.
You want me to go?
Yeah.
Okay. I think back to 1976, Dr. Renee Richards, the first trans female tennis player. And I look at her rankings and how she did. And she didn't go out there and conquer the women's tour, did she? No, she didn't. I also think back to Martina Navratilova on the tour and what people said about her, and that she was a manly woman, and that, but she worked her butt off for where she got. And then I also look at what they had to say about this exact subject matter. And they took an interesting stand and felt that it is unfair. As a professional tennis player, even Dr. Renee Richards said, yes, there is a difference, and that is something that we need to look at. Now, they didn't say they shouldn't be playing. They just said it's something we need to spend a little bit more time on. Maybe that's what we need to do, and not just shut them all out. I don't think that's the way to go.
I think the latest research that I was reading was if you have gone through puberty already, that your bone density, your lung capacity, your I forget a few of the other metrics that they use.
Cardio.
Yeah, plus a larger frame. Generally, men are taller, or a biological male's body, that they do give these advantages. And although I feel terrible for somebody, a transgendered person who wants to be in sports and play as their gender, I think there is mental damage that can happen for them not being able to. I don't know how to square that with the professional sports world, which is a billions of dollar industry, and how to make it fair. And we've already created biological women's sports divisions because women weren't able to compete at the same level as men. So I don't know if without a revolution like how we do in boxing, where we just size people up by height, weight class, to do that with team sports, I don't know how to square it, even though 99% probably of people playing high school sports never make it into the professional world. So there are benefits for that to happen. I don't know if the answer is transgender leagues or open leagues where anybody, male, female, could be part of it.
I think that to kind of push back on one of the comments you made, I don't know that women's leagues were created because they couldn't compete against men. I think in the heteronormative world that we live in, there is a very binary understanding of gender, and that's male and female, and so women weren't able to compete against men because they were lesser than or not as strong or whatever baloney was brought up at that time. But to your point, I agree with you. I don't know much about sports ball. I don't know the rules. I don't know the categories.
You are not going to gay.
I'm not going to pretend that I do, but I do know that in several sports, you can't compete outside of your class. So your body weight, your muscle mass, and I don't understand if we just take the gender out of it and we look at the person's, physical ability and compare them and put them in teams or leagues with equal people, regardless of their genders, why we can't move on and get past this point. This is ridiculous.
I think there's a couple of reasons why, and a couple of things that I think are important. Trying to live in this story in just the facts. First, the AMA and the International Olympic Committee completely have resolved this issue. The American Medical Association, every branch of medical representation in America says this is not an issue. There is no reason why trans cannot compete in women's sports. It does not give unfair advantage. They've made a decision. The medical science has made a decision, including the International Olympic Committee. That is a fact. But I think that there is a second fact going on, which I hear in your observation. America's not ready. We're just not ready yet. And while we don't like it, or I think a preponderance of LGBTQ community doesn't like it, it's still a fact. America is not ready for it. But that is not necessarily a bad thing, because when I saw this new poll result, it was not surprising to me, but I look at it as a challenge, because 15 years ago, this was a similar number against gay men. Mm-hmm. It was a similar number against gay marriage. And what is required when people are uncomfortable and they're not ready is to continue to talk about it. And while we may not get it today, and while we may not get trans rights and trans in women's sports today, we eventually will, because we'll talk about it and talk about it. And the people that are uncomfortable will meet more and more trans people, and they will go, wait, they're not the boogeymen that Fox News and Tucker Carlson sold us. And they will begin to change. But that takes time. And so we should forgive, potentially, some ignorance because they don't know any better, and give ourselves more time to help get them there. And we've proven, all of the people sitting at this table have proven you won, because they felt the exact same way about us 20 years ago. And we've won. And that's exactly what will happen in trans. We just have to be a little more patient to get there.
I wonder if that would be the sentiment if what we were being told was that queer men couldn't participate in sports anymore. Because I feel like there's a divide in our community, and the entire queer community doesn't necessarily identify or understand with the trans experience or struggle.
And that's a whole different conversation. You wonder if there was a secret poll in the LGBTQ community.
It's not so secret. I've seen it on Facebook of our own community posting about this topic.
Yeah. It doesn't make it right for sure, but we're just not ready.
But if it were,
we can be. And remember, once upon a time, our sexual identity was illegal. We couldn't sleep with each other. I mean, come on. Today, even the most crazy of the crazy don't suggest that. It takes time to push people to come out of their ignorance. And that's what we're watching in the trans
that's what we're seeing in Florida.
Yeah,
laws roll back and they do impact us.
LGBTQ plus news is vital for our community and for the broader world as a whole. We have enough enemies at Fox News. Tucker, Sean, and Laura are loud. We need passionate allies. Happening Out Television Network, Queer News Tonight, and It's Happening Out are literally out of the closet and into the headlines. Our community needs your support. Like this broadcast and subscribe now to ensure